It's time now for Countywide, a special presentation of Yavapai Broadcasting News. Join Paul David and Kyle Benedict as they talk with our community's leaders, newsmakers, and people in the know. You'll hear about the hot topics that affect all our lives in Yavapai County. And now here's today's Countywide.
Welcome to Countywide. I'm Paul David. As always, great to have you in studio with us today. We're going to get a little history lesson on Clarkdale. Paul A. Handverger in studio today. Welcome.
Good morning.
He is the author of Images of America, Clarkdale, put out by Arcadia Publishing. Now, we've talked about these books before, and we've had the authors in to just give us a history. I don't think it's so much about the book we're talking about. It's just nice to get our hands on people like you, Paul, and have you come in and give us a history lesson on the area.
Well, I enjoy talking about Clarkdale. I enjoy history. I've lived here a little over 50 years, both in Clarkdale, Cottonwood, and in this area. Worked here. My children were educated here, like you.
Yeah.
And we've enjoyed history, and I was asked to write the history because I had written small articles on it and given lectures. But as a geologist, I have history of the land. And that's sort of the way I started this book, was with a prologue. I said I would just put the foundation. And when you read the book, you'll find out why Senator Clark actually picked Clarkdale was because of the land. And the, do we have a picture of the...
Yeah, the pictures will come up as we're talking. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Sorry.
That's okay. The land, though. Let's talk about the land, because you mentioned it's a foundation.
Yes, and Clarkdale was built on some ancient lake beds. And the proof of it to the geologist is the various limestones and sandstones that are in there. But the inhabitants at that time were large creatures, and in fact, Clarkdale's first known living resident that I know about was an elephant.
Oh.
And it was discovered in one of the cement plant quarries. When they recovered it, they recovered the full skull, and a pallet of it is available for viewing in the Clarkdale Museum.
Oh my gosh.
But those lake beds cover the whole Verde Valley, and that's the basis for all of us. We live on that land. The climate, and when I mention climate, starts with C. Arizona's known for 5 C's. Well, let's start with the first one. I'm going to start in the talk, and I'll feed them in, is climate.
Okay.
Clarkdale has a great climate, as a number of people come here to live just because of the climate.
Precisely.
But the ancient people, the very first Native Americans, came here for the climate. Particularly, this became known as their winter habitat, as opposed to the mountains, which were much colder. Despite Cottonwood being 18 degrees this morning, it's a lot colder up on top of Mingus.
Exactly.
So we have evidence that Indians lived here in 10,000 years ago. Stone artifacts, and then we have stick figurines from Indians that lived here about 4,000 years ago, called the Archaic, and then of course in Clarkdale we have Tuzigoot, and these are the most recent of the older Indians, and they were here from about 500 A.D. to 1425. They left for unknown reasons, but that's the second C, is cotton. Arizona's known for cotton. Indians were growing cotton up in Clarkdale around Tuzigoot. The Spanish found out about our resources up in the mountains via Indian conversations. And the first Europeans came through Clarkdale, actually spent a night in Clarkdale just above Yavapai College, where the Haskell Spring area is.
Everybody can see that right now in their heads. Okay. Okay.
They describe it very well, and there's no question they spent the night there, 1583. And then some other Spanish came, and it was this time that the first flag, I guess, the Native Americans didn't raise flags and claim land like Europeans do. The Spanish claimed this as New Spain. So now we got a Spanish flag flying over us, which lasted until about 1822 when the Mexicans revolted and made an independent country. Now we had the Mexican flag that Clarkdale was under, until 1848 when we went down and fought the war against Mexico, and we took over the Southwest. The President Lincoln declared us a territory in 1863. He didn't want a confederacy because there was another flag flying in Arizona at one time, and that was the Confederate flag for a short while in the southern part of the state. And it's interesting, the South with the Confederacy in the state and the North stayed with the U.S., I gather. After the Civil War, Clarkdale had its first large group of residents. It had about 2,000 Yavapai and Apaches. We don't know exactly when the Yavapai Apache came into the Verde Valley, but it was sometime after the Hohokam and the Sinagua Indians were living here. The Camp Verde soldiers rounded up under General Crook, the Apaches. They established a reservation, and there's a paper that I wrote on that reservation. It's available at the Clarkdale Museum, just across the river from Cottonwood. And it was these Indians that built the first Cottonwood ditch that is still being used to this day.
That's amazing, huh?
They got very ill living on the river because of the malaria. So they had to move them, and the doctor moved them up to Haskell Spring, up by Yavapai College. So that was our first big group of India, and there were a few hundred in the Sinagua, but here's 2,000. So this was a real population boom in Clarkdale.
Should we take a break? Let's take our first break. All right, we'll take our first break. Paul Handverger in studio today. He's the author of Images of America, Clarkdale, published by Arcadia Books. I'm Paul David, Countywide, back in just a couple minutes.
Really? Buzz, what's up, man? You left some leaves burning out here.
Yeah, I just came in just for a second.
Come on, man. If it's too hot to touch, it's too hot to leave. You could torch the whole neighborhood.
It's a good point there, Smokey.
9 out of 10 wildfires are caused by humans.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
There's a shelter pet who wants to meet you. Meet one today. Visit theshelterpetproject.org. Adopt.
Get caught buzzed driving, and you could do some hard time.
Craig, knock it off.
Sorry, Mom.
It could cost you around $10,000 in fines, legal fees, and increased insurance rates. And that could set you back a few years. Buzzed, busted, and broke. Because buzz driving is drunk driving.
We finally bought a place.
You seriously have enough saved to do that?
We've been putting a little aside each month.
So at the end of the month, we have nothing left to save. How is my account overdrawn?
When it comes to financial stability, don't get left behind. Get tools and tips for saving at feedthepig.org.
Good one, son.
Last summer, my new dad took me on vacation. First, we went deep sea fishing.
Wow! I'm so proud of you, son.
And then we went on Thunder Shark. That was awesome! Let's go again. 3 times. I gotta say, it was pretty cool.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Thousands of kids in foster care will take you just as you are.
Oh, not again.
Welcome back to Countywide. I'm Paul David. We're having a lesson on Clarkdale today with Paul Handverger, author of Images of America, Clarkdale, published by Arcadia Publishing. We're going to skip forward in time a little bit.
Yes.
To 1839 to 1925, William Clark. I've been dying to get you in here to find out about this guy, William Clark. So tell us about him.
William Clark was born in Pennsylvania on a farm. He lived in extreme poverty as a child, decided to go west for his fortune, went up to Montana, found a small deposit of placer gold, and that was the beginning of one of the great fortunes ever raised in America. $1,500 worth of gold converted to probably 500 million in the turn of the century, 1900, wow. Which today would be, I don't know how many $billion.
And he started that find?
He made this find up in Montana.
I'll be darned.
Clark was a real entrepreneur, and with his skills of business, he would invest in a company, but he took the whole company. He didn't join it with anybody. He didn't partnership. So he was the sole owner of railroads. For example, he built the railroad from Salt Lake City to Los Angeles, California.
Oh, really? Okay.
And midway, he stopped and he saw the land around this Las Vegas, the fields, and he purchased all that land, and that's the birth of Las Vegas. That's why it's called Clark County. He had recreation areas like Disneyland up in Montana. He owned water companies. He had merchandising. He had his hand in so many things throughout the West. And you go to Death Valley and there's Clark's name. He had a silver mine over there. Whenever he had these things, he was the sole owner. His fortune compared him at the time to people like Morgan, Vanderbilt, Rockefeller, and one publication said he was the second wealthiest man in America. Wow. At the time. He suffered many family tragedies, his personal life, his childhood sweetheart. He married, went back to Pennsylvania and brought her out west. They lost 2 children, and she died after only 24 years of marriage. He remarried, and then he lost a daughter from this marriage. And shortly after he died, 2 members of his family died. He had a lot of tragedy in his life.
How many kids did he have?
He had 3 girls and 2 boys by the first wife and 2 girls by the second.
Okay, so typical big family.
He has a reputation that I don't think he deserves as far as the labor market and the people are concerned. He seemed to be extremely fair to his workers.
Okay.
He built Clarkdale. I found the minutes of a federal mediation board meeting where the mine owners said to Clark, "You built too good a home for those people. It's too good. I could live in those. They have inside plumbing. You have all kinds of utilities. You've set standards that we can't meet." The other copper companies were pretty unhappy. He provided recreation. We've got the golf course. We've got the dancing areas. We've got the tennis courts.
Incentives to come work.
Everything.
Right.
And this was a time of labor unrest in the world. He was doing it for his job, but he wanted a happy workforce. He ruled with a tough thumb. If your kids did something wrong in school, really wrong, he'd kick you out of town.
Oh, wow.
I mean, he did run the town. He allowed a couple of places to serve liquor, and that was about it in the town. Mm-hmm. But he provided free medical care, and he provided a fair pay. He wanted good workers, and everybody that ever lived in the town seemed to be happy with that.
When did he become a senator?
Yeah, the senator story. Now, this is the other side of Clark, his ego. He wanted to be called a senator, and I read it that that's all he wanted. He paid $431,000 to buy the Montana state legislature. In those days, senators were elected by state legislators, not by the people.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, that amendment didn't come in until, I think, 1917, 1918. Yeah. And he bought 47 out of 54 legislators, and he said, I never bought a man who wasn't for sale.
Okay.
It was such a flagrant buying and the misuse of money in the political process in America that the Senate kicked him out. They wouldn't accept his credentials. So he ran again in 2 years, and this time he successfully bought his way and got through it and became a senator.
Oh.
As a businessman, he was one of the best. As a senator, not unlike some today, he was lousy. He was not a person.
Your book says that he became a senator, but not much was done in terms of what he promised and said he would do. He really didn't do anything. So you think it was just to have that cap, senator?
Yeah, I think it was an ego thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's obviously it's competitive by the building of his castle practically in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
He was trying to get into the upper elite, and he was not necessarily admitted by them. Probably because of this certainly set him back as a person. And this came up recently in this Supreme Court decision, Citizens United, that just occurred 3 years ago, where corporations got the right to spend all they want, all this black money. They brought up this election and saying, you can't do this. Well, the Supreme Court did it, and we have the kind of elections we just had. But Clark's name was brought up, his whole history.
I'll be darned. What brought William Clark to Clarkdale? Was he just a man with a nose for money and finding? He
went to the World's Fair down in New Orleans in about, and I don't know when, let's say 1883, I think it was 83. And there was a mineral exhibit there, and he saw specimens from the mine in Jerome, the ore body. And he sent his engineer out here, and the engineer sent back and said, come on out, this looks good.
Really? Based off some rocks he saw in New Orleans. Wow.
And he bought out everything. He paid everybody a fair price, but he bought everything he could. He didn't really quibble about it because he had a goal, he had a vision. And then he had a vision for Clarkdale. He bought the Haskell Spring area to provide the water for the community, which it still does, except now it's subsurface. He bought that in 1906. He didn't even start designing the town of Clarkdale until 1910. Didn't start building it till 1912.
Wow.
But he was that type of a person where he just foresaw, he had a goal,
Visionary.
He knew what he was going to do.
Right.
He knew what he was going to do. So he picked the site, made that smelter. That's one of the great smelters and one of the great copper companies in the world.
Let's take our second break, okay? Paul Handverger in studio today. We're talking about Clarkdale, Images of America. It's published by Arcadia Publishing. I'm Paul David. This is Countywide, and we'll be back in just a couple minutes.
So, I just moved in with this family, and it's embarrassing. The little one, he likes to go outside and crawl around in the giant litter box. I don't know what he's doing. I mean, I was born and I knew how to use the litter box. Look at that. That's disgusting. Oh, poop already. You're making me nervous. Oh, okay, I can't look at this anymore. I really hope he grows out of this, for his sake.
Time to wake up. I've got a job to do today.
I've got a job to do today.
Don't forget, you've got a job to do today.
Hey, Mom. I got the job. Thanks.
Got the job. Welcome aboard.
Have a good first day at work, Mom.
Your donations to Goodwill fund job training programs right in your community.
Feels good to start fresh, right?
Sure does. And like that, you're a job creator.
get out to the forest.
Let the kids connect to their roots. It's gonna be so much fun. Yeah! Woo-hoo! Hey, guys, wait up!
And discover the wonders of nature with your family.
These trees are the key to our way of life.
Fresh air.
What a glorious morning!
Clean water.
Woohoo! This is great!
An endless forest adventure.
Let's rock this jungle!
Yo, this is untapped territory.
How amazing!
Visit discovertheforest.org to find a forest near you.
Welcome back to Countywide. We've got just a couple minutes left in the program. I'm going to hold this up to you. Images of America, Clarkdale, Arcadia Publishing. Paul Handverger here is the author of this book. A lot of awesome pictures in here that came from the Clarkdale Historical Society.
And others.
And others throughout the book. But it is really amazing to, if you drive through Clarkdale today and then you look at this book and see these buildings that are still sitting there today, how different the whole area looks. It baffles me all the time. Anyways, the one last question for you. Jerome reached the moment of, it was a ghost town. Did Clarkdale ever reach that same period, since Clarkdale and Jerome were kind of fused together back then?
They were fused together in a lot of ways.
Right.
And yeah, Clarkdale was, when I came in 1962, Lower Town was for sale, most of it, for $120,000.
I'll take it.
And the town was struggling. Here it had been an active town with all kinds of community going on. Everybody moved out. The houses were all owned by the copper company, so they abandoned them.
Mm-hmm.
So the houses was stripped, robbed, derelict. But then the cement plant came in 1959 and turned it around and saved Clarkdale. And from that day, it's just been reborn, and it's due to the cement plant initially.
I think you'd have a hard time finding a house in downtown Clarkdale for $120,000 anymore. That's for sure. We've got a couple minutes left. There's one other thing big about William Clark's life, and that was his son. He had a flight,
yes.
a plane ride. Tell us a little bit about that, if you would.
The young boy young. He was in his 30s, I believe. He enjoyed flying. He actually tried to establish an airline here at Clemenceau Airport, which is now called Cottonwood Airport, which is not the real name. It really was given to the county as Clemenceau Airport, and that was supposed to be the name.
Ah.
But he took a flight with a very well-known and famous instructor who had flown with Lindbergh. And they were doing what was called instrument flying, which means you can't see outside. The pilot can't see, but the check pilot can. And they got into a spin, and for some reason, never pulled out of it. And I'm a pilot, and I don't know how many 100 spins I've done in my life, but something went tragically wrong, and it crashed within sight of the golf course, which is within sight of where his family lived.
And within Clark Memorial Clubhouse, you have a photo in this book right here that has a picture of Clark Memorial Clubhouse with the parking lot, and there's cars lining it and stuff. And I think that picture was saying that they were there to watch this take place.
This was the funeral.
The funeral. Oh, it was the funeral. Okay.
That was the funeral. Yeah, it ended the Clark dynasty because both sons were dead, and they were the ones that were going to run the company. And the three daughters got together and sold it for $20 million to Phelps Dodge.
At its peak, what was William Clark worth?
Everybody said 300 million. A number have said 500 million. And I think it's probably closer to 500 million. When his daughter, who lived to 104, died, she was worth 200 million. And she's been spending considerable amount of money. So I think we're looking at $500 million.
Paul Handverger, thank you so much for coming in today. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Great book. That's today's Countywide. I'm Paul David, and we will talk to you again next time.